G'day everyone, long time no see. Well, last year I did a tier list video where I did a route from Brisbane City heading south to Salisbury and then out west, and wasn't sure how it would be received, but people seemed to like it. And then last weekend I was sort of stressing out before going into hospital, and I went for a ride and did a loop out to the airport, and I thought, well, why don't I turn that into a tier list video too? So let's go. Well, my surgery went fine, thanks for asking, although now I've had all of my wisdom extracted in one go, I'll probably become a car brain, right? Anyway, I'll just refresh you on the criteria I use for these tier lists. So, number one criteria is the level of traffic stress. So that's basically, 1 is the lowest level of traffic stress, and that's when anyone of all ages and abilities would feel comfortable riding. Up to 4, where really heavy traffic, fast traffic, only the people who are sort of really your avid cyclists, as they like to say, would be comfortable there. Then there's a rating on comfort, which is based on things like shade, terrain, how steep it is, and how close you are to cars and their toxic fumes and noise. Then there's connections, so how well connected the route is, so to other bike connections, to destinations and places you actually want to ride to. Crossings is obviously really important. If a bikeway is really difficult to get across a main road, then it's not exactly useful as a bike link, or if you have to wait a long time, all that kind of thing. And then lastly, well, last year I used a criteria about upgrades, planned upgrades in progress, but it's a rather nebulous thing. And in my experience with Brisbane City Council and the state government, upgrades can just disappear. They can be planned and then the plans are just gone, or they're cancelled, or they're postponed until budget improves. So rather than something like that, which can fluctuate, what I would chose to use is a fit for purpose ranking. And what I'm using for that is the Queensland Government's own guideline for selection of cycling tracks. And so at the bottom of that guideline it says, bicycle facility selection should also consider the design principles of safety, directness, coherence, comfort and attractiveness to ensure the facility meets strategic performance objectives. Where bicycle volumes are high or expected to be high, or where the goal is to encourage cycling on a preferred route, principal cycle route, a higher quality bicycle facility should be considered. So if a route fits that description, a high quality route that's going to encourage lots of cycling and cater for large numbers, then that'll get a 5. If it's an adequate sort of solution, it sort of does what it needs to, but it's not great, and if there's huge demand, it'll probably need to be upgraded, then it's a 0. It doesn't hurt its score, but it doesn't make it better. But if it's really not up to what it's actually already being used for, and certainly nowhere near what it's needed to be used for, then it'll get a minus score, a -5. So if it hasn't been built well, or nothing's been built there at all, it's going to score even lower. So under this new scoring system, last year's rankings changed a little bit. I won't redo the whole video. Sylvan Road drops from a C to a D. Griffith to Salisbury drops from C to a D as well. And Oxley to Centenary drops from E to F. The only one that went up was the Ipswich Motorway Bikeway to Oxley, went from B to A, and that's because of the fit for purpose criteria. Today's route starts at the Bicentennial Bikeway near the go-between bridge. We go across both the go-between and Kurilpa bridges to Roma Street Parklands. After waiting an eternity to cross Roma Street, we head up through the Parklands to Victoria Park, which is where I consider the North Brisbane Bikeway to start. Now, I've broken the North Brisbane Bikeway into 3 sections, since they're all slightly different in how they were built, or not yet built, thanks Brisbane City Council. From there we take the Kedron Brook Bikeway past the under criterium track to the Brisbane Airport Precinct. Then we head to the airport to Hamilton North Shore via Sugarmill Road and Kingsford Smith Drive. Then head along the Lorrisbonny Riverwalk to Newstead, and then follow the other riverfront shared paths to get to New Farm. And finally, we take the New Farm Riverwalk through Howard Smith Wharves and the Brisbane CBD before ducking down Queen's Wharf Road past the new mega casino that's apparently already going broke, and back onto the Bicentennial Bikeway. I'll link the Strava route in the description if you're interested in checking this route out for yourself. The other caveat I will note is that I did this ride on a Sunday morning during school holidays, so traffic was very light. I tried to imagine the level of traffic stress if it was a busy time, since a bike route is only useful if you can ride it when everyone is trying to get places. Now, the video I did last year ended up about 45 minutes, which is a bit long. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to keep the segment descriptions a bit shorter. But what people also said is they wanted to see more of the route so they could actually maybe go and ride it themselves and see what it was like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the full video of each of the routes in separate videos, which I'll link to. So hopefully you get a bit of the best of both worlds. Well, enough of me crapping on, let's get to it. The first section takes me from the Bicentennial Bikeway to Roma Street Parklands. To do this, we'll cross the go-between and Coorulba bridges. There's more direct routes, but this is more scenic with spectacular views of the Brisbane River, South Bank and Brisbane City. The entire route is separated from road traffic, so it scores a level of traffic stress of 1. Top marks. It loses a couple of points for comfort because the climb up the go-between bridge is not insignificant, and you're also very exposed to the sun on a hot day, plus you ride alongside a 4-lane road, so that scores a 3. Connections are a 5 out of 5. You can access the South Bank Boardwalk, Riverside Drive, George Street bike lanes, and all of the destinations that the inner city offers. There's only the one road crossing at George Street, which is controlled by traffic lights, but it still loses a point because of the awkward driveway crossing between the go-between bridge and Riverside Drive. Now, is it fit for purpose? Well, the bridges themselves are, but the narrow and sharp bends on the connection between bridges and the silly barrier at George Street add unnecessary conflict points between cyclists and pedestrians on what should be a priority cycle route. But it's not bad, so it scores a 0. Sounds funny. Overall, that gives it 41.6 out of 50 and slips onto the A tier. The next section takes us up Parklands Boulevard to join what Brisbane cyclists call the grammar school path along the rail line to the land bridge across to Victoria Park. The first pinch uphill is quite steep, and it's a shared street with general traffic. While it's signposted 20 km per hour up the hill and 40 km per hour alongside the park, when it's busy you invariably get impatient drivers up your butt, so I rate this as a 2 on level of traffic stress. The steep pinch up to the Parklands takes away from the comfort, as well as some fairly blind corners on the first section of the grammar path. Please take it easy and keep left, and despite the path down to Victoria Park being marked bike only, you do sometimes have pedestrians walking in it. Originally there was a plan for a bridge from the Court Precinct to the Roma Street Parklands bypassing the climb up Parklands Boulevard and crossing Roma Street at grade, but of course they ran out of money. Connections are excellent. You have access to all the fun of Roma Street Parklands and can get through the park to Gilchrist Avenue, Centenary Pool and to QUT. The first crossing onto Roma Street Parklands is a dog's breakfast. Long wait and there's no actual ramp onto the roadway, so you'd be stuck on the footpath. So it loses a point for that, even though the rest of the road crossings are all underpasses and overpasses, which is great. This is the primary route into the CBD from the northern suburbs, and the fact it's really just shared paths and mixed traffic streets means it's not really built for the highest quality traffic, but it's adequate. So, a score of 0, not good, not bad. All up, that gives it a solid score of 36.6 and a B on the list. The next 3 segments are all the North Brisbane Bikeway, though some would argue Victoria Park isn't part of the North Brisbane Bikeway. Whatever, this is my video. The first section of the North Brisbane Bikeway is between Victoria Park and Mann Park at Windsor. This first section was a bit of a Frankenstein effort to join up some existing paths and make a coherent route, but as a result the treatments aren't consistent. However, the entire stretch is fully separated from motor vehicle traffic, so it still scores a 1 on level of traffic stress. The route is quite flat, there's some shady sections, and apart from knowing where to turn in Bowen Park, it's fairly easily navigable. There is a steep descent, or climb if you're coming back the other way, in parallel with Wren Street however. Connections are very good. You can get to the Victoria Park, Ekka Showgrounds, Royal Brisbane Hospital, and via the Toxic Path spaghetti paths you can get to the Enoggera Creek Bikeway heading towards Ashgrove. And if you're really intrepid, you can find a sneaky back way to the Breakfast Creek Hotel as well. Crossings aren't great. While the crossing on Gilchrist Avenue dwells on green and most of it goes underneath Bowen Bridge Road and the inner city bypass with underpasses, The light crossing of O'Connell Terrace is awkward, and crossing Campbell Street is really awkward. Because there's a mishmash of treatments, some narrow shared paths and awkward crossings, and given the importance of the route as a primary cycle route, it can't score that highly on fit for purpose, but it is adequate, so again, 0 for fit for purpose. Overall, it scores 38.8 and lands on B on the tier list. The next section of the North Brisbane Bikeway was planned and delivered by the state government, and they clearly had a vision of a consistent separated cycleway with priority road crossings. As a result, it really is a delight to ride on. Fittingly, this section starts at Mann Park with the Caroline Lister Memorial Bike Repair Station. Caroline was a founder of the North Brisbane Bikeway Action Group, which campaigned for over a decade for this bikeway to be built. She worked at the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital and was beloved by her colleagues and the cycling community. Sadly, she was hit and killed by a truck driver right outside the hospital on her way to work in 2020. We'll never forget you, Caroline. On the bikeway itself, it is fully separated from traffic with grade separation for the first half of it, then is at grade but separated by armadillos and wands on Dixon Street. While the armadillos and wands don't feel quite as solid, you do feel appropriately separated from traffic, so it still scores a 1 on level of traffic stress. It's relatively flat, apart from a climb up past Albion train station, but there are sections that are quite exposed due to lack of trees, which makes it hot in summer. There's no shortage of connections with access to multiple rail stations and cafes, though there aren't many intersecting bike routes, which hopefully will be addressed with some future transit-oriented developments going on. While the state government wanted priority crossings on every intersection, sadly, Brisbane City Council cockblocked that move on Blackmore Street and Albion Road, which really stands out when the rest of it is so perfectly prioritised for cycling. A real letdown. The crossings at the at-grade section aren't to everybody's taste, with the bike lanes dipping into side street to enable holding space for turning traffic. I think they're a good approach. However, given it has been built to the highest quality, it gets a bonus 5 for going above and beyond for fit for purpose. Overall, it scores 41.2 out of 50 and is an A on the tier list. If future connections are built and BCC relents and allows priority crossings, it would join the S tier. But really, that's the least of our worries because now we're on to the last section of the North Brisbane Bikeway, which, if you've seen my previous videos on the subject, doesn't exist. So this section is stage 5 of the North Brisbane Bikeway to be delivered by Brisbane City Council, and they have failed and failed and failed again to actually deliver anything yet. As a result, you exit the separated, stress-free bikeway and are dumped onto painted bike lanes with parked cars and 60 km/h traffic right on your shoulder. Again, this was filmed on a quiet Sunday morning. Imagine this in afternoon peak. It is awful, and without doubt a 4 on level of traffic stress. I would literally go out of my way to avoid riding here. Then you navigate a roundabout and wait precariously for an opportunity to turn right onto Junction Road before ducking off to the relief of the side streets down Keith Street. Those quiet back streets are well shaded and wide, so that stops this from getting a 0 for comfort as well. Although the narky signs on some of the NIMBY residents objecting to making this better for cycling, bizarrely proclaiming they want safe streets for all, doesn't feel particularly welcoming. Connections are good, despite the absence of actual bike infrastructure. There's Eagle Junction train station, the shops, and you can get to the Kedron Bikeway, which stretches west all the way to Ferny Grove, and east to Brisbane Airport, which we will see. There are no crossing provisions at all. It's completely up to you to either try vehicular cycling and take the lane, or surrender to the footpath and be subject to motorists completely ignorant of needing to give priority to people crossing side streets. Probably not a surprise that in terms of fit for purpose, this scores a -5. All up, this gives it a putrid 12 out of 50 and an F on the tier list. Honestly, 12 flatters it. Well, after enduring the hell that is Dixon Street, Kedron Brook Bikeway is a welcome reprieve. After navigating the labyrinth of paths underneath the rail line, you head east past what was once Toombul Shopping Centre. This stretch is shared path, and being a Sunday morning, lots of people out for a leisurely stroll, so pack your patience, and I imagine it's even busier during the week. You then wind past the Nunda Criterium track for racing if you're into that sort of thing, and then navigating a well-designed overpass of Kedron Brook and head southeast towards Brisbane Airport. Why would anyone ride to the airport? Who rides to catch a plane?
Well, fair question in Brisbane perhaps, but it's common in cities around the world. More importantly, Brisbane Airport is the second largest employment hub in Queensland after Brisbane CBD, so enabling people to get to work actively is kind of important. Once into the airport precinct itself, the paths are a little bit more sketchy, quite narrow, with light posts further reducing the width available, but at no stage do you have to ride on a road. So we're back to a 1 for level of traffic stress, which is a relief. Some of the paths are quite exposed, so it would be pretty unpleasant in the hot sun or heavy rain, and you do spend some time alongside fast-moving motor traffic and its accompanying noise and farts. While you can go to the airport, you can also head onto the Bikeway out to Nudgee Beach or onto Nudgee Road itself to reach businesses and destinations there. And the Skygate shopping precinct at the airport, though that's not for the faint-hearted. But for the most part, this path is an end-to-end prospect without much to really connect to in between. Crossings are passable with traffic lights at Widdop Street and a zebra crossing in the airport precinct, but I had to swipe some marks after being swooped by a magpie while about to cross an unprioritised crossing at Viola Place. While this route isn't going to comfortably accommodate thousands of cyclists a day, which it could if Brisbane Airport attracted more of its workforce to arrive actively, it's still passable, so on the fit for purpose scale it gets a 0. Overall it scores 36.2 out of 50 and rates a B on the tier list. So to get from Brisbane City to the airport, we've had segments of A, B, B, A, F and B. It's amazing how much of a weak link that missing 500 metres section of the North Brisbane Bikeway really is. So the airport district is a weird one, since the airport land itself is owned and managed by the Brisbane Airport Corporation, who are responsible for the roads and paths within it. But then outside it is the usual mess of Brisbane City Council and state government infrastructure. Nothing exemplifies this more than this section of the route. The first section along Lamandra Drive is a really nice shared path which the Brisbane Airport Corporation recently extended to reach Sugar Mill Road. The extended section uses asphalt and it was delivered really quickly as a result. But once you reach Sugar Mill Road, you're on your own, buddy. Again, this is a Sunday morning, but Lamandra Drive, Sugar Mill Road and Kingsford Smith Drive are freight routes. They are busy, heavy vehicle routes. Sugar Mill Road has absolutely no active transport infrastructure, not even a footpath you can escape to. In fact, there was a petition open with Brisbane City Council to provide infrastructure on this road that's just closed. Click the link on screen now if you want to have a look at it, but hopefully Council will listen. Then it's a slog along Kingsford Smith Drive to Hamilton. There's some bike lanes, but the road surface is unbelievably rough. It's exposed, and just imagine having heavy trucks whizzing past your elbow. No surprise then that this gets a 4 on level of traffic stress. It also rates extremely low for comfort. Hot, exposed, traffic, fumes, just yuck. The only connections of note along this route is access to the Gateway Bridge Bikeway. There's no crossings beyond the standard traffic intersections either, and although this is not likely to be a highly in-demand cycle route the way it is, it's not fit for purpose for any reason, so it gets -5. It scores an abysmal 9.4 out of 50 and is the F'est of F's you've ever effed. Now you might ask, why would you go this way? And that's a good question. The problem is that there is no good way to get from Hamilton North Shore to Brisbane Airport or the Kedron Brook Bikeway. There is a planned bikeway connection between Viola Place and Schneider Road, but Brisbane City Council and the state government can't sort their shit out to get land transferred and construction started. There's Nudgee Road, which has the largest body count for cycling versus motor vehicle crashes in Brisbane, and there's slightly less dangerous but still bad Racecourse Road and Zillman Road to Widdop Street. If you were to get a job at Brisbane Airport, you would think being able to live at Hamilton North Shore and ride to work would be feasible, huh? But definitely not the way things are now, and that has to change. Speaking of Hamilton North Shore, it's like an oasis compared to the desert we've just experienced. A priority development area converting old industrial land to residential and mixed retail, it's been designed from the ground up, and part of it included separated cycle tracks on the streets. They're really well done, though some pedestrians seem to get confused that green paint with bikes painted on them means they're for bikes, not walking. There are protected intersections with traffic light controls, and it was great that to turn right I was able to go through on a single phase. The North Shore connects straight to the Loris-Bonnie Riverwalk, which was the only aspect of the $650 million Kingsford Smith Drive upgrade that gave it a positive benefit-cost ratio result. Though I did have to stop to move all the bloody beam e-scooters and e-bikes off the middle of the path. Riddance beam. The Lauresponi Riverwalk is a beautiful ride along the river, connecting to the recently completed Breakfast Creek Bridge into Newstead Park. The whole route is separated from traffic, so again, 1 out of 4 for level of traffic stress. The Riverwalk is quite exposed to the sun, but there are water fountains and shelters along the way if you want to stop for a drink and enjoy the view, and the entire route is flat, so it's pretty comfortable. Connections are pretty good. You can cross Kingsford Smith Drive to access various destinations along the way, though expect to wait a long time at the traffic lights. And you can find a sneaky way through to Breakfast Creek Hotel and then through to the North Brisbane Bikeway at Hurston if you're in the mood for some exploring. The crossings through North Shore are all prioritised, though I did feel a little tense crossing the shopping centre entrance driveway because of the lack of visibility and the fear that some car brain would just rush out into my path, worried more about cars than people on the path. More of a speed hump for drivers might make it clearer that they have to give way. But the whole route is well designed to cater for Hamilton North Shore being fully populated and with lots of people riding towards the city, so it gets a 5 on fit for purpose. Overall, it scores 44.6 out of 50, and honestly, if they just improve those driveway crossings in North Shore, it would be S tier, but it still gets an A. To get from Newstead to New Farm, I chose to use the Riverwalk riverfront shared paths that run from Newstead Park to the powerhouse at New Farm, with a break in the middle at Tenerife. Then it's on the road for a stretch to get to the New Farm Riverwalk. It's much quicker to ride on the road, but again, this is me trying to find the least stressful, most comfortable route for people to take. Being a Sunday morning with lots of people out for a leisurely stroll, the shared paths are busy. People don't always naturally keep left or listen for bikes or bells, so you do have to just go slow. The stretch in New Farm Park is easily the busiest and most chaotic in terms of random people behaviour. I particularly like the woman posing with her bike standing on the path. Anything for Insta likes, I guess. Oxlade Drive in New Farm is marked on Google Maps as having bike lanes, but it really doesn't. And even if it did, it probably wouldn't matter. One of the wonderful things about successive transport ministers here in Queensland is that they refuse to prohibit parking in bike lanes for balance. Right. Anyway, because you have to endure a shared road with a 50k per hour speed limit, it raises the level of traffic stress to 2, and honestly, when it's busy, that's probably more like 3. I'm being quite kind. Being constantly on edge trying to negotiate pedestrians combined with less than ideal wayfinding that left me riding into a dead end on the river path drops some comfort levels down. It is very shady though. It's very well connected though with New Farm Park, Newstead Park and all the food and drink establishments in New Farm at your disposal. There's really no crossings involved, but getting across to Oxlade Drive isn't great. Is it fit for purpose? Well, this is clearly designed as a recreational route more than a transport route. There's no way it's catering as a primary transport route, but it's good for what it does, so it's adequate. All up, it scores 31.8 out of 50 and a C on the tier list. Now, this might be controversial. Anyway, this section starts from the New Farm Riverwalk, which was first built in the 2000s, but washed away in 2011 during the floods. It was rebuilt after that to a much higher standard, and it withstood 2022. It's got a separated bike and pedestrian path and magnificent views of the New Farm Cliffs, Brisbane River and the Story Bridge. It really is a fantastic recreational and commuter transport route into the city. Well, that is until you hit Howard Smith Wharves. This was a classic case of Brisbane City Council taking a chunk of underutilised public land, giving it to private developers and saying, knock yourselves out. Sure, they had conditions like ensure a high quality cycling route between the Brisbane CBD and New Farm Riverwalk, but the developers scoffed at that. Instead, we have shared path that feeds past busy breweries, pubs and restaurants. Sunday morning was fine. I imagine during weekend evenings, it's just impassable. And Howard Smith Wharves is apparently dumping another massive hotel on this site soon, and it's not even open to consultation. Awesome. What they've done here is completely undercut the value of the New Farm Riverwalk. It's a real travesty. Once you're off the shared path, you enter a shared zone with hotel patrons being dropped off. Awesome. Uber shit. Ordinarily, you can get onto the Eagle Street riverfront, but it's also under construction, so I stuck to the on-road route down Adelaide Street and Eagle Street itself. Speed limits in the city are 40 kilometres per hour, and that's really the only thing keeping level of traffic stress here down to a 3. Despite being inner city, there's actually really poor connectivity as well. The riverfront path will be good when it's reopened, but the New Farm Riverwalk is just an end-to-end connection, and Howard Smith Wharf is at the bottom of a cliff, so there's nowhere really to go unless you go up a lift. CityLink Cycleway starts at the end of Elizabeth Street, but getting to it from this direction is, well, awful. So I did so illegally. Go ahead and find me, I don't care. If not for the New Farm Riverwalk boosting things, this would get a -5 on fit for purpose, but I'll grudgingly leave it at 0. All up, that's a score of 22.8 out of 50 and a D on the tier list. As a connection between New Farm and the CBD, that's really terrible. Now, as we know, the Bicentennial Bikeway is the only route on the S tier, and yet it's surprisingly challenging to get to and from it from the CBD itself. However, with the recent opening of Queen's Wharf Road has reopened, and that makes it easier to get to the Bicentennial from the CityLink Cycleway on Elizabeth Street. Of course, the day I did this, Elizabeth Street was closed for reasons, some construction thing, so I was ushered onto the footpath. I'm not going to mark it down for this because normally it's clear, and I filmed that too. You do have to endure an interminably long wait to cross Elizabeth Street at the top, but from there you can turn down Queen's Wharf Road and make a sharp bend onto the Bicentennial Bikeway and you're good to go. Overall, it's the lowest level of traffic stress despite the stressful overall environment in the Brisbane CBD. Being right up alongside multiple lanes of motor traffic does detract from the comfort, and the lack of other bike lanes in the CBD limits connectivity. The best connections are Edward Street to Botanic Gardens and the future Kangaroo Point Bridge, and the Victoria Bridge across to South Brisbane when that's complete. Crossings are safe, but the long wait does lose them a point. It's certainly a good start at providing for cycling and scooting in the city centre, but I wouldn't rate it as the highest quality possible. Still, it's adequate in terms of fitness for purpose. Overall, it scores 37.6 out of 50 and is a solid B on the tier list. The list is now very full of A's and B's. I might have to start fresh on the next one. Well, there you have it. If you want to ride from the city to the airport and back again in a loop, you have an idea where to go. What did you think? Do you have other routes you take similarly? What do you think of my ratings? I'd love to know. Slide into the comments below. For me, the lasting impression from this is just how much of a weakness a weak link can be. The absence of that last 500 metres or so of the North Brisbane Bikeway is just madness, completely undermining what is otherwise a really high quality active travel corridor from the northern suburbs into the city. I really hope this term of Brisbane City Council administration finally gets it done. Full videos of all the segments of the route are available. Find the links in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit the like button. If you really loved it, please consider subscribing, and given the absolute labour of love this editing is, maybe even smashing that super thanks button. And that's a wrap. Ride safely, drive rarely, and I'll see you out there on the bikeways of Brisbane soon.